All right. So welcome to the our Lunch and Learn. Um, the truth about stuck, 7 myths that make the next career step harder. And I'm your host, Jimmy Okubanjo. There will be a recording of this available on YouTube, and so you'll get a link to this when you're sent the replay for that. So the vision for these sessions, as a reminder, we want to be a source for building adaptive resilience for high achieving women in high stake environments. To help you navigate this period of change, whatever this change could be for you personally. I want to create a judgment-free space for hard but essential conversation. And I want to help create a community to help you get what you need to get done. And I envision we want to envision and deploy sustainable and strategic solutions for career transition. Ultimately, our goal is adaptive resiliency for the duration of your career. So when I think of career longevity, but success over time. So adaptive resiliency is our goal. And a bit about myself. I'm Jimmy Okubanjo, the founder of the Rise Firebird Impacted and the director of the Rise Firebird movie. I've got 20 years of leadership consulting and engineering experience in 14 countries. I've made the movie Rise Firebird, highlighting the struggles of overlooked professionals. And my purpose is to help professionals achieve their potential and build generational wealth so future generations can make more choices, and dream bigger. I would like my children to tell me, Mom, I want to be an artist, and to know that there is the financial backing that will allow them to pursue a career in art or Olympic table tennis playing, or to be a scientist and do very abstract but really important theoretical studies. And that does require having some sort of financial basis for them to be able to pursue those goals. And for many of us, the route to that is our profession. It is our 9 to 5. That is the foundation we're able to leave for children, nieces, nephews, causes we care about, vision work, nonprofits, the legacy work that we want to support financially is going to come from our 9 to 5s. So by helping women navigate that next career chapter, by guiding them in transforming career uncertainty into decisive action without burnout or being overwhelmed. So let's go. And for those who are watching the replay, we will stop in about 20 minutes or so and ask questions that will not be recorded. So if you want to ask questions and be part of the live Q&A, you need to join our next Lunch and Learn whenever we may be holding those. So let's get into it. The truth about stuff. So, I thought about career transitions, and I think it can be really exciting when one is kicking off a change in their careers, and that can be, again, changing job, getting promoted, taking on new responsibilities, having a child while keeping the exact same job, taking on new projects. They're just different. A transition can look and be very different. And there's definitely an exciting part to it. But for a lot of us, it can be terrifying. And that delays us in making that move. It can be confusing, and we can know that something needs to change, but at the same time, it isn't changing. We're not taking the steps to make it change. And that's the stuckness that comes where one isn't particularly happy where they are, but we're unable to make the steps, the changes needed to get to where we want to get to. And so I want to talk about how our beliefs can actually impact that mindset and actually make us feel more stuck. These aren't just in our heads, they shape our decisions, and they can keep us second guessing, which prevents us from moving forward. So I want to break down 3 major myths that I run into when speaking to professional women, especially women with a lot of experience when it comes to their next steps, which keeps them second guessing, not taking action, either committing to where they are or taking action to make a move. And again, that move could be getting a master's. It could be writing an article. It doesn't necessarily mean leaving your industry. It may be changing jobs, but whatever that step is, a lot of us still feel unable to do these. And these are some of the myths and limiting beliefs that we hold on to. So one, I've spent years building this career. I just can't walk away. I've spent, 10, 20, X 5 years. And why does this feel true? So let's be honest. I want to be a bit honest here. We've invested decades into building these careers. We've spent years. We built up networks. We have technical expertise. We understand the landscape. So falling away or moving away from that feels like we are throwing away our effort, credibility, expertise. And this could be, I spent X years in this organization. You've built this network within this one company. Even if I stay in this industry and go somewhere else, it's like I'm starting all over again in the same industry, but without the same level of credibility I had. We've seen others pivot and struggle. And if you can drop in the chat, like, have you seen it? Have you heard stories, fictitious or real, of people who have made a pivot and it appears to us they're not doing really well? And our achievements are deeply tied to our industry. So this question about spending X number of years and then walking away, when our achievements, the papers we've written, for those of us who've written papers or given speeches, or just the achievements we made within our company are really tied to the industry in which we work. They may not translate so well in other sectors. But here's the reality check I'd like to offer. There is still something about your situation that isn't serving you. That's why you're considering a change. There is something about the status quo that isn't or hasn't served you. And that's why you're considering looking somewhere else. Now, and it's worth trying to understand, what is it about that situation that you are either in or that you left that no longer serves? And that may take a bit of time to reflect on, because it may not mean, you may not need to leave your industry if you can pinpoint what specifically, or what were the things that weren't serving you, or maybe you do need to leave. Secondly, you may not need as big a pivot as you think. It may not need to be this start from scratch to a whole nother sector. Many of us, when we think of transitions, often they can just be us building on skill sets, taking a 5% shift. And that's still, 5% is still massive. I think we are less than 1% DNA. Okay. I don't think we're up to 5% difference in DNA from like chimpanzees and humans. So I'm not a biologist, so please, if you're in the biology space, let me know if that is correct. My point is, even a small change can have a significant impact on how you feel about your career, feel about your options. So you don't necessarily need to make a massive shift. And often we haven't identified what our true north is. We haven't thought about, what do I really want for my life, for my career? Because and this does take some thinking to, what is my true north? Because as you think about that, it can put the concern about 20 years experience not being relevant in the right perspective, in the perspective, once you put it under the context of what's really, really important to you. So for some people, if it's making lots and lots of money, if you're pivoting to a space where you may be able to earn a lot more, but you will not be as well known, is money your true north? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe it's about making sure you can pay for your kids' university, college. You can pay for your 7 kids to go to college and pay in cash. So then that may not be as important to you, or it may be that you want to retire at 50 or 45 or 35 or whatever that number is. Or you want to travel the world. You want a space that you want to be able to see more of the world. That's really important to you. And so then, it may not be as important that people that maybe starting over again may make more sense. So I'm not saying there's a right answer or a wrong answer, but knowing what's really important. So think about the foundation. Oftentimes people don't, I'll be honest, people don't often remember all the stuff that you did in your career. And it's not anything personal, but just really, people are just generally obsessed with themselves, in that sense. So think of your past experience as foundational, It's your foundation. It's not disappearing. Even if no one remembers it, this is your foundation. This is your core skills that you're building on. And so a reflection question for you. What if your past 20 years were the foundation for something even bigger? If your last 10, 20 years were a foundation for something bigger, how would you think, would it matter so much that people remembered it, where you're going? And there isn't a right answer to that. Okay, myth number 2. People will wonder why I left a good job. This is particularly poignant for women and people of color and women of color, where we are often the only ones in the room, the only ones at the table. If you are the head of department or you're a vice president and you're a woman of color, you are chancellor, you are the only woman of color in that space. And if you're a woman, there are probably a handful of you. You may still be the only woman in that space. So when you move away or step away, people may start to speculate. So the reality is we have a reputation, whether we know about it or we don't. And there's a concern that we may damage it, or people will project a story onto us that isn't true. Something else that makes this feel true, and I think is a reality, is a lot of us overachievers tend to be people pleasers. We want to be liked. We want to be respected. We want to be seen as someone who's made it. We want people to value us. And it does serve you to a point, because you talk about being likability, you want to be approachable. But sometimes we do cross over into the people pleasing camp. And the reality is, not everyone is going to understand your decision. That's okay. You could be leaving to become the president or prime minister of whatever country it is you're from, and there'll still be people in your organization around you who will think you failed, that it was a bad decision, that you left. You could have, through your investments, bring in $1 billion, and people will still think that you leaving your job is somehow a failure on your part. So we have to recognize that we cannot manage other people's expectations or views of us, because that will keep us stuck. And we have to come to some peace with the reality is that we can't build our careers by committee, and that people are not going to like the choices you made. Some people are going to be very vocal, some aren't. And this could be people in your own home. This even could be a person you share your bed with that has very strong views about your career. And I'm not a marriage counselor or a bed partner counselor, but I will say that it doesn't negate the fact that this could still be a good choice for you. And so we have to learn to have peace with our own instincts, our own choices about what we want. And we let go of worrying about what people think about us, and do what's the best for our own profession and for our own mental health and for our own well-being. The final myth I had was, I can't afford to take a step back or lateral step, even if it's strategic. I can't afford to do that. Why this feels true? Well, we have been conditioned to think of career success as linear. You go from associate to senior associate, from senior associate to specialist, to senior specialist, to officer, senior officer, junior manager, manager, senior manager. And then you go up and up and up and up. And if you stick on one level too long, or go sideways or go down, that is failure. You go from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 to grade 4, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, grad school. We have been taught for the first part of our lives that success means progression up. And for ambitious overachievers, that's probably served us really well. But now the idea of taking strategic moves, which may be lateral, sometimes a step back, feels like we are betraying ourselves. I had a chat with an amazing person recently, and they were considering changing industry, but they wanted to stay at the same level of seniority and continue and take that pay rise and get come to the same level of pay. But you're leaving an industry that pays very poorly, and you may go into an industry that pays very well. So yes, it may be a step down in the short term, but their promotion cycles are much shorter. And even if you're going to start job hopping, you've got a better chance of actually in a year beating, or a couple of years beating what you were earning at this high level, even though you'd be junior. And over time you could rise. But my point for that is, there's no guarantee with that. But for this particular scenario, the choice they had to make was either stay in an industry they didn't enjoy, that they couldn't see themselves becoming financially sustainable in, but to hold on to their seniority at greater detriment to their mental health, emotional health, and financial health, or take a step back and then build something, but still building their experience in another direction. And that's very uncomfortable for overachievers. I can imagine Jimmy, from 50 years ago, honestly, like having a panic attack, just hearing me say this. Myself to be like, you are back, never. He'd been all kinds of Pentecostal tongues and holy water, because what I'm saying is horrible. But here's what I would like you to picture. We do this because we're afraid that we want that external validation. Again, it's that people pleasing. We want the accolades. How do I explain to someone I've taken this step? But here's one thing. Think of it this way. If you were going from Chicago to Houston, would it make sense to get into your car? Because it's southwest. So Houston is southwest of Chicago. Set your compass from your driveway to southwest, and then hit gas and drive straight southwest at like 80 miles an hour, or say 60 miles an hour, in a straight line to Houston. Would you get there? Who thinks that? Put in the chat, would you get there? And you can't because you've got to, but you're going linear. That's linear. It's an example of linear progression, just in a straight line. You've got to slow down. You've got to reverse. You've got to go left, go right, go faster, go slower, park, be still. But eventually you'll get to your destination. It just will not be, it may not be a linear path. So if you're flying a drone, maybe you could do that with a drone. But if you're driving a vehicle or even taking public transport, that's even longer. So I think the more that we can divorce this straight line, this linear approach to what we want to do with our careers, the more freedom it gives us to explore the kinds of things that would be sustainable to us, and that can build an enriching career that we'd want to be in longer. And the longer we stick around, the more we're going to progress. So a reflection question for y'all would be, if stepping sideways for a year could double your long-term opportunity, would you do it? If stepping sideways for 4 years, for 2 years, for 3 years, 4 years would double your long-term opportunities, would you do it? So we've gone through the 3 myths, and there are a couple of touch on a couple of bonus ones just to kind of touch on. One I hear a lot is, if I make the wrong move, I won't recover. It's important to trust yourself. Even if you make the right moves, you make mistakes. So we can't really predict what is or not the right move for you, but trust that you are smart enough and you have the perseverance to again, veer back onto the right direction. And then finally, I should be grateful for what I have. This is not really a myth, but it is a mindset that kind of stops us from moving, that I should be grateful. Gratitude and progression can be hand in hand. I can be grateful to my high school speech teacher for being a great teacher, but I can also go to college. I can go to college and also be grateful to her. I don't have to stay in her speech class for the rest of my life to prove I'm grateful. And I feel like where we're made to feel, anyone that would make you feel you moving on is a lack of gratitude, that's a form of manipulation. And for those of us who are people pleasers, we may be more susceptible to that type of manipulation. than someone who is maybe a bit more, a bit more trusting of their own instincts. And again, people pleasing has served us to a point. I'm not saying this to condemn anybody. Managing the emotions of other people has served us to a point quite well. And there was a need for that. But now we have to kind of slightly alter how we manage those relationships with other people. So that's what I have for you all today. And we are not going to have a lunch and learn next Wednesday, but we'll be back the last week of the month. What I would like to offer is that if you'd like to watch the Rise Firebird movie, because that's what we'll be discussing in the last lunch and learn, please do reach out to us at info@arisefirebird.com, and we can get you some clip of the movie for that discussion. But what I'd like to leave you with at the end of this lunch and learn are some practical steps, what you could do next. So I want to just share some three quick things you could do that will at least move you out of some of this myth mentality, I hope. So one is, in terms of people pleasing, unfollow or mute 3 people on LinkedIn or social media who trigger you, who's either because the kind of things they post could have feed into people pleasing for you, or you're trying to people please them. So maybe just mute them so you don't see their posts. I'm sorry, unfollow them. So you're not getting yourself caught up in the comparison of doubt. You can always go back and follow them later. Number 2, schedule a 15-minute coffee chat, virtual or in person, with someone who took a lateral move. Someone who did a lateral move. Have a conversation with them. No expectation. They're not trying to convince you. Just hear what they have to say about that lateral move they made, the lessons they've learned from that, what they do differently in that space. And number 3, I want you to kind of say this to yourself. Write this down, say it to yourself. I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm allowed to want more. I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm allowed to want more. All right, so that's the task. That's where we are, and I wanted this to be done by 1/2 the hour. So thank you all for letting me share with you again today. And we're gonna now go off camera. We're gonna go off video to answer any questions that people may have.